You have a great lineup this afternoon of 6 brilliant panelists. We've got Sarah Lyons, who is the NEU lead officer and for health and safety and the environment for the NEU. We've got Monica Gort, who is training officer in the NEU. We've got Andrew Morris, who is the Assistant General Secretary, Employment and Bargaining from the NEU. Jane Nellist, who's a health and safety officer in Coventry. And we've got Ian Watkinson, who is the executive member for Lancashire, but he's also the NEU chair of the Health and Safety Off. Before I introduce those, I just want to repeat that what a brilliant month it has been. We've done really well in our webinars that we've been putting on this month with a health and safety theme. And we've reached hundreds of members during these times. We kicked off right at the beginning with Andrew Kingscott, who is the lead inspector for the HSE, and we covered topics with a COVID angle, online safety, MSDS, and also safeties in science practicals and in outdoor lessons. But we've also looked this week at the more reoccurring themes that we as trade unions deal with on a daily basis. So air pollution, asbestos, and we've also launched a toolkit for domestic abuse in the workplace. All of those were well attended, and what we are hoping to do is to put those on our website and on a platform for you to be able to access those once we get after the end of this month. We also managed to link up with Youth Climate, and we looked at climate anxiety and eco schools. So there's been some really wide-ranging aspects of health and safety, and anyone who has watched any of those webinars after this week thinks health and safety is boring, then they need to be thinking again. So thank you very much to the team that have organised those, and without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to one of the key organisers, but our lead officer in health and safety environment, Sarah Lyons. Welcome this afternoon, Sarah.
Okay, I won't speak for too long because I know we need to allow plenty of time for questions, but I just thought I'd focus on a couple of areas where we've either toughened our position up recently or issued new guidance in light of greater understanding about how the virus is spreading in schools. So as far as the government is concerned, the guidance says that, as we know, COVID is primarily transmitted between people through respiratory, so droplet and aerosol, and also through contact routes, and that transmission risk is highest when people are in close proximity. And it goes on to talk about aerosol transmission occurring in health and care settings. But then crucially, it says airborne transmission may also occur in poorly ventilated indoor spaces, particularly if individuals are in the same room together for an extended period of time. So this absolutely describes the current situation in schools and colleges. Now, I'm not a scientist, but to understand how transmission occurs in schools, I found a tool or graphic that was published in a Spanish journal a few weeks ago really helpful. So it starts off by showing the riskiest scenarios: a classroom with the windows closed, the door closed, so no ventilation. It assumes that the teacher's infected and that there are no measures to counter the aerosols floating around. And so it suggests that after 2 hours, 12 students out of the class of 24 could become infected. And then it goes on to say that visualize how if everyone wears a mask, the number that could become infected then drops from 12 to 5. And then on top of that, if the class stops after an hour to completely refresh the air, then the risk drops again. So you get my meaning. So what makes a difference is the ventilation, the shorter encounters, the smaller groups, and the wearing of masks. And that was a tool developed by the University of Colorado. So when we were looking to update our latest checklist that we developed with Unison, Unite and GMB, and face coverings and ventilation were measures that were very important. So on face coverings, we say that schools should require them to be worn at all times, including in the classroom, by staff and students in secondary schools and by staff in primary and SEND settings. So that's further than the DFE guidance, which just says that staff and pupils in year 7 and above in high and very high risk areas should wear them in communal areas, but not in classrooms. And I don't really understand why the DFE is so stubbornly resistant to the idea of masks, particularly in secondary classrooms. It doesn't seem like it's that it's a real burden on either older students or staff. On ventilation, obviously it's a real tricky issue going into the winter. But we have put together some guidance that schools can use as part of their risk assessment. So I mean, even measures like leaving windows open a crack will help, as well as thoroughly ventilating a classroom between uses, and of course keeping groups smaller, though we know that's the tricky aspect as well. And other suggestions include to balance the ventilation and warmth issue, relaxing uniform and dress codes to allow staff and students to dress more warmly. If necessary, the windows are open, you have to turn the heating up higher, you might have to turn the heating on earlier in the morning to keep that temperature comfortable throughout the working day. And it also goes on to talk about other measures, things like HEPA air cleaners and carbon dioxide monitors, and there's links to various HSE and other guidance documents. So I'll stop there and pass on to my next colleague.
Thank you very much, Sarah. The next panelist we're going to hear from is our training officer, and that's Monica. Good afternoon, Monica.
Hello, Amanda, and thank you. Yeah, so it's always been so important to have a health and safety rep in every school and college, but never more so than now in the current situation. When it became clear very early on that we wouldn't be able to run face-to-face health and safety rep training, an online offer was developed on a need-to-know-now basis. In other words, what did new health and safety reps taking on the role in the current crisis need to know to enable them to feel confident enough to start being an active NEU health and safety rep in their workplace? The training now consists of 3 parts, each 90 minutes long, run over 3 consecutive weeks via Zoom. It packs quite a lot in and covers the role and rights of trade union health and safety reps, getting involved in the risk assessment process, carrying out inspections, health and safety committees, bargaining, and a whole lot more. Almost 800 reps and officers, the majority of whom are new health and safety reps who've stepped up in the current crisis, have attended this training since April. And during Health and Safety Month, 40 more have completed the training. And NEU health and safety reps are making a real difference. There's no getting away from the fact that this is a really challenging and stressful time for everyone working in education. But there's lots of examples of successes being shared on the training. For instance, health and safety reps holding their first members meeting in the school or college, accessing information like the health and safety policy and the latest risk assessment, securing regular meetings with the head or principal, and reaching agreements on a whole host of issues that are of concern to the members. There's now also a 90-minute Zoom session called Work-Related Stress as a Collective Issue, which is open to all of those who've completed the 3-part online training or who have attended the face-to-face training in the past. So just to be clear, the online training doesn't replace the 4-day Health and Safety Reps face-to-face course. And when the situation allows, all of those reps who've completed the 3-part online training will be invited to attend. A health and safety officer / advisor 3-part training has been piloted over Health and Safety Month, and the intention is after a review of the pilot that we will roll this out further in 2021. So if you're on the call today and you don't have a health and safety rep in your workplace, or you know of workplaces which don't have a health and safety rep, please consider taking on the role or encouraging others to. You don't have to be an expert on health and safety to be an NEU health and safety rep. Essentially, the role involves meeting together with the members, your colleagues, deciding collectively what the issue or issues are that concern you the most, and then approaching the head or principal with your demands. And if 2 of you wanted to share the role, that's fine. And indeed good practice, as the more reps we have in a workplace, the stronger we are. The online training will give you the tools and resources you need to take on this role, and there's lots of support for you too. As a trade union health and safety rep, you've got a legal right to paid time off to attend training in your role. So there's one starting next week on Tuesday, and there are more planned to start in January 2021. So do book on, they're all on the website, and yeah, come on it, even if you want to find out what the role involves before making that commitment to take on the role. Workplaces with a trade union health and safety rep are safer and healthier workplaces. So do make sure that there is at least one in your school or college. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you very much, Monica, and a really positive overview there of what's been going on this month with regards to training and recruiting and answering questions from our reps out there. So, and also if you are a rep that's attended that course, I can see many are putting some links and some comments in the chat. It's really good to get the feedback from you on that, because we're always developing and learning and making sure that we are presenting you the best stuff that we can do. The third panelist we're going to hear from this afternoon is Andrew Morris. Andrew is the Assistant General Secretary linked with Employment and Bargaining. Welcome this afternoon, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Amanda. This is the first time I think I've been on screen during this Health and Safety Month. So the first thing I want to do is to say thanks to all of my colleagues who've made it happen. It's grown out of the fact that we couldn't have the physical health and safety briefing for health and safety activists this year, and it just shows how much happens during that two-day event, that the content of that we've been able to make a whole month's worth of online events out of it. It's quite unusual for a trade union these days to have a dedicated national health and safety unit and a full-time person on health and safety, and I think the work that's been done shows the good sense that we have shown in having that post still in place in the form of Sarah, supported by Patrick. And then when you take into account Monica's years of experience and enthusiasm in organising the training and learning events, and colleagues like Jono in the organising team who support the work around the country, plus all of our lay colleagues who spend so much time giving up their own time to support members. It's a really good setup that we've got in the NEU, I think, and hopefully we can take it further. One of the ways that we want to help take things further, and that's what I want to speak about briefly, is through initiatives like the Escalation app that we've developed in the past few months, which allow activists to be directly in contact with the union and allow information to be passed around the union using the wonders of what I still call new technology. Now, for those of you who haven't used the app, you're increasingly unusual if you haven't, because we've now had responses from over 5,000 schools where either the rep or another member has completed, has used the app to send back information about the current situation with regard to safety in the school. And the good thing is that the vast majority of responses have been telling us what the position is, but haven't been asking anyone to come in and assist. So it doesn't mean that the position is entirely satisfactory in every school, but it shows that the rep and the members think that at the moment they're on top of things. However, the app does give them the opportunity to provide immediate updates to us on what the position is, what the problem may be, and what support they may be needing, and allow the union branch locally to be speedily alerted about that and to be put in contact with the rep or the member. There are 3 communications that go out every weekend now that we send to reps and to members in schools without reps. One of them you may have seen is the organised publication, and then there are similar bulletins which we call COVID-19 weekly bulletins. They've been tremendously successful as well. They've got a higher opening rate than nearly all of our other communications that we send out to reps and members, and the opening rates and the click-through rates have been increasing every week with every new edition of the bulletin. We'll be sending something out this weekend that will remind you of the existence of the joint checklist, which we published jointly with the other support staff, with the support staff unions. And it will be alerting you to some advice that we'll be sending out next week, which is intended to ensure that clinically extremely vulnerable members can secure the right to work at home, which we've been advocating since the start of term, but which is really important as we emerge from lockdown, and the advice to work at home is going to be replaced with advice to go back to school. We want to make sure that we can help them to work at home, and that's the intention of the advice that will go out next week. So the Escalation Act, as I say, it's available on the NEU website. There's a page which contains a demonstration video of how it's intended to work, and also information about how you can yourselves use it. As I say, it allows you to use it if you're a rep, but also to use it in conjunction with colleagues if you're not a rep. And it also allows you, I think, to volunteer to become a rep, which is obviously very important, although I'm sure everybody here doesn't need any encouragement in that direction, others do. It's also intended to be a long-standing feature of the union from now on. It's not designed purely as a health and safety tool. It's designed as a vehicle for identifying and raising any issues of concern. And of course, at the moment, for every issue of concern with regard to safety, there's also an issue with regard to workload. And we're encouraging the use of the app to raise those issues as well. So far, it's been a tremendous success. We'd like to see it used more because it does show us how our networks of activism are developing and extending. And as I say, if you haven't yet tried it out, then please look in the chat for the link and go and have a look at it.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and thanks for that updated information on the app and also what next, because you're right, the government's changing its rules of tiers and the tier system, and education seems to have been removed from that tier system as it was there before. So it's really vital that we are on the ball and continuing to be on the ball with that. So thank you. Next person I'm going to bring in is Jane Nellist. Jane is the Health and Safety Officer in Coventry NEU. Welcome, Jane, this afternoon.
Thank you. And can I just say, first of all, that thank you to the team of people nationally who have supported us through this crisis with some fantastic material. And that's, you know, we need to say thank you to them. I work in a team of officers in Coventry and specialising in the health and safety work. And we've developed a really good team of health and safety reps that have sort of specialised in health and safety, moved on to the health and safety. And I think for somebody who's been, you know, trying to plug away at health and safety, COVID has certainly brought it to the front line, and we mustn't lose that now. We've got to harness all of that enthusiasm and that. I think, you know, we've been supporting the work with the risk assessments to make sure that they're firm in schools and raising issues, challenging the local authority to make sure that the advice and guidance and that they can feed back to the DFE and the work that they do on where, you know, some of our concerns is. One of the tools that we found really, really good to use is a WhatsApp group for our reps. And you know, that's been really good because it has been such a challenging time. People are very worried. There's been a lot of concerns, and to give them the confidence and support. And actually what we've got now is a team of reps that are doing that between themselves as well. So that's really good. I've also worked across the region, supporting health and safety officers across the region and reps. And I think, you know, certainly it has been a very challenging time, but the checklists that we've had and the work that you know, that has been provided there has made sure that we have, I can't say keep our schools safe, because we are seeing, you know, quite big increases in the cases of COVID in our schools, but to mitigate against the risks where we can. One of the bits of advice I put out this morning on our WhatsApp group, because obviously it's very cold in Coventry, I'm sure it is in other places, is that really we need to be telling people to wear hats and scarves, fingerless gloves, because we need to keep that ventilation in our schools and not sort of fall prey to the shut the window and, you know, because it's cold. So I think, you know, thank you to the team, and the month has been brilliant.
Thank you, Jane. And again, thank you for the insight into how it operates around when we've got the union advice out there, how that's operating on a local level for you in Coventry, and also, you know, something that has to echo through everything we do in a union. It's working together and not being out there on your own. The final panelist before we bring in your questions is Ian Watkinson. Ian is the executive member for Lanarkshire, but he's also the chair of the Health and Safety Organising Forum. Welcome, Ian.
Thanks, Amanda. So to echo comments from Amanda and everybody else, it's been brilliant to be involved throughout the whole of Health and Safety Month, and to help with the organising as well, and to have chaired some of those sessions. And I think it was Andrew who mentioned that we should have all been enjoying these excellent sessions together in person in Bristol, I think it was, but for obvious reasons we can't or couldn't. But it's been no mean feat to pull all of this month together and to reach so many new reps, officers and members. So that has been fantastic. But like many of you, and Amanda hinted at this at the start, I've not been able to get release from school for all the sessions across the entire month, but I am looking forward to catching up and watching the recordings of those webinars that I've missed. We did anticipate that not everyone would be able to attend every session, so all bar one, I think, have been recorded and will be available soon, I hope, from a Health and Safety Month resource library on the website. I know that in my area and others, health and safety advisors, officers and reps are already planning on using some of the webinars as part of their own local full and half day health and safety rep training and organising sessions. And they'll complement the online national health and safety rep and officer training that will also be continuing. We've heard from Monica about those. And yeah, that's that. I mean, we know, and Monica talked about it, I think we've got to keep up our work recruiting. There's an urgent need for active trained health and safety reps in every school and college in the country, and the more we can do on that, the better. So thanks to everyone for zooming in and helping make the month so successful. We've already started planning for next year. Thanks, Amanda. That'll do for now.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of our panelists. I've got quite a few questions coming in, but I also I've got a couple of comments, and I absolutely love doing these because it's really good to see what reps, what members are doing, what officers, what branches are doing, and how everyone is working together. And it's not just about asking questions, but sharing good ideas. So I'm going to start with the first one, which was from Bob Groom, and he's in Norfolk. And Bob said he's had communication from Andrew Kingscott from the HSE. He's informed me that HSE have visited many schools during the lockdown, and there have been many schools that do not have NEU members, yet these schools have been using the NEU checklist as a benchmark. This has to be a fantastic endorsement of the work that has been carried out. And I really think it is. And I think that's a really good endorsement of what we're doing. But there was a question around HSE, which I'm going to add on to that. And it was Mary. And Mary Owen has asked, when settings have visits from HSE, should they or would they be expected to be given a written report? So that's the first question. I then got a question from Val in Brighton and Hove. She said they're in desperate need of helping recruit reps as they are very thin on the ground here. Any tips, please, either on here or on the Google groups, or when they've had time to tie them in or think about them. So if any tips on growing those. And in line with that, I've mentioned Jono, who is our tech team member today, but he's also has a role as a health and safety organising forum, organising support. He supports that committee. Or that group of people, and he said he's absolutely up for helping you cooking up an organising plan for health and safety rep recruitment, and his email will appear in a moment in there. So if you don't get your question answered, then please do contact Jono as well. He'll have some great ideas to help you and support you in doing that. So that's the first question, is around, is there HSE written reports? Second question is, how do we recruit? They're very thin on the ground. And I'm going to give you a third question, which is, I think from Pat, but it might be from Anne Barker, depending on the namings, but either Pat or Anne. It is believed that teachers are now at the highest risk of infection of all workers. Do the panel think the risk of infections for teachers can be reduced? And in addition to that, a second question, since the new tiers have been published this afternoon, they've been inundated with emails and calls asking what is the NEU doing now on the ground to support CEV members beyond the 2nd of December? What can we do other than forward checklists? Because absolutely secretaries are working to full capacity and caseworkers in those. So I'm just going to take those to start with, and I'll come to you, Sarah, first.
Yeah, so so the first one was Mary about the HSE spot check. So perhaps just for the benefit of others, if I say a bit more about the HSE spot checks. So the HSE undertook, this was early this term, to visit or to contact around a quarter of all the schools in England, and this followed on from a similar scheme that's operating in Scotland. And the way it worked was that a call centre would contact a school, and there was a script, and if the responses given led to concerns, then that would then generate a visit from an HSE inspector. As far as I understand it, or certainly as the HSE explained it to me, these were intended to be kind of quite supportive visits, not kind of Ofsted style. And as far as I'm aware, there would be a written report, because otherwise, you know, what record would there be of any advice that was given? But if anyone has any information to suggest that that there wasn't a written report, then let me know, and I can always check up with Andrew Kingscott. And yeah, just to comment on what Bob said, it's great that Andrew Kingscott was endorsing our checklists, and he's the well, he's actually leaving his position, but at the moment he's still the HSE Chief Inspector for the education sector. What else was there? So
there was question about how do you recruit and retain health and safety officers, and also with teachers, or I'd say actually education workers. It did say teacher on the question, but education workers being at the highest risk in the removal of tiers and the protection of CEV.
Yeah, I think probably Ian and Jane could say quite a bit about the recruiting reps. And I think at the moment, as I think you mentioned earlier, health and safety is quite exciting, and I think that probably helps. But you know, we've discussed before how, you know, health and safety isn't just about wandering around with a clipboard, and that it's about the areas that members are interested in. And obviously COVID is one of those at the moment, but things like workload and mental health, they're not always seen as traditional health and safety, but those are the kind of issues that will draw members in. And Pat's question about can the risk be reduced, I mean, yeah, I mean, there are measures that can be introduced which would make a difference if they were implemented properly. So, you know, we've already talked about the ventilation, the masks, there's things like smaller classes, there's the hygiene measures, we've talked about rotas, but, you know, the problem is implementing them in, you know, and dealing with the lack of social distancing in school. So yeah, theoretically it should be possible, but obviously it's difficult.
Okay, thank you. And I'll come to Jane, first of all, with regards to recruiting and retaining kind of health and safety reps.
I think one of the big things is about having the training, and the training's been excellent, and people have been able to access that online. That's made it much more equal because people haven't had to travel and can do that, and it's been put on at times, and the reports are it's very good. But as I say, I think it's keeping in touch and getting a team of people. The expertise is not always with us, with me. That there is an amazing amount of expertise out there. So it's about developing a team, and that spreads. And I think actually what is really good is what Amanda just referred to it. We've got some really good teaching assistants that are members of the National Education Union that are taking on those roles. And that gives actually a new perspective as well to to health and safety, different issues and that. So I think there isn't I'm not sure there's a sort of a script of to how to build your health and safety reps. It's just about finding whatever opportunities you can to get to sort of make our members know that they have the ability to do that, and we give them the tools, the training, the checklists, and give them the confidence as well, because being a health and safety rep, it's challenging the management in many cases. So it's giving them the confidence and the backing of the union to do that work and stepping in to support them where they need that. So thanks, I hope Jane. That helps.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. And as a branch and district secretary as well, I would say one of the things is actually your branch and district secretary could be introducing members to the leadership team and saying, this person's going to take on the health and safety role. Because actually, while we're in COVID, all of the information that the union is producing is valid for everybody, and you can work together on this. So it is a time to be working collaboratively, to be saying, you know, this is the guidance from the government, and our union have just put it into a format that's accessible. So there may well be some bridges you can do, some linking across there, or working with a school rep you've already got and getting them in sort of a smaller meeting to start with. Ian, anything further you wanted to add?
Not much, Amanda. You've just taken the words out of my mouth there. Yeah, so the more that your local district and branch can do to help get the word out there, put events on, put Zoom meetings on, develop those WhatsApp groups, the better. If there are places for people to go who might be feeling a bit wary, I'm not sure I fancy being a rep, then if there's events taking place that you can signpost and point them towards, then that's always going to help. Amanda's just mentioning about buddying up, working in clusters with a neighbouring school. It could be a high school working with a cluster of primary schools around it. It might be that a rep from one of those schools could visit virtually or otherwise to attend a staff meeting or something like that. So it's just being busy, being active. And Jane talked about training being important. It is, and it's great to have somewhere or something going on to point people towards. It's not that helpful if you recruit someone and then there's nothing for them to do or nowhere for them to go. But there is, we've got lots now, haven't we, know nationally and locally as well. So the more stuff that's going on, the better. And there is lots of stuff going on. And if you're not sure watching this, if there is something going on close to you, then get in touch. We'll find somewhere for you.
Brilliant, thanks, Ian. Okay, I've got some more questions. So Mary has asked, what supervision resources are available for reps and officers? And then I've got a question, says so I kind of talked about this, but I'm not sure anyone's answered, so I'm going to re-ask the question. Since the new tiers have been published this afternoon, have been inundated with emails and calls, what is NEU going to do with regards to CEV members beyond the 2nd of December? And then one specifically for you, Jane, how have Coventry managed to get regular and frequent data? Many of us are being denied access to data.
I mean, that isn't something that we offer on a national basis. I think by supervision, Mary means, you know, the opportunity to sort of download any difficult experiences with a sort of experienced colleague or somebody in a professional role to sort of help protect your mental health. But and that isn't something that we offer.
Okay, thank you. Any of the other panelists want to make a comment on that question before I move on to the other one? I'll come to Jane then, with regards to data. How do you get such good data, Jane?
Well, we were very clear at the start about what our expectations were from the local authority. And we do get very good data. And my view is that's what everybody should be entitled to. We get data that it's a day out of date, but that's because it includes what actions have been taken. So we get the positive cases and then the number of isolations, like the number of pupils that have been isolated, the number of staff that have been isolated. And that gives us then the opportunity to, we've logged it then school by school, so we can see where we think there's a need for the local authority to be intervening. But I would say that what we get in Coventry is great, but that's what everybody should be getting. And if you're not getting that, then, you know, I think you need to tell them that Coventry's getting it, so why haven't you got it?
Yeah.
And you know, it has to remain confidential, so we have to be clear that, you know, it is confidential material, but we have got permission from the local authority to share that with our reps. So that's really good, because it does give us that in the local authority schools, we can do that, not for the academies. But yeah, and just on the CV, I think that's going to be a huge issue. And I think that's something we need to stand firm on, and that the CEV members should not be going back into school. And that I'll leave Ian to maybe add to that.
Okay, brilliant. I'll bring Ian in on the CV. I also want to echo, in Portsmouth, we have the data. Our policy is we have the information as soon as the school community have been informed. We then get it. It's also published on our local authority website, of which schools have had cases in, and action that, and we then are aware of action that's taken. We have fortnightly meetings with Public Health England in our area. The Public Health chairs the trade union meeting and feeds into what is going on, so that we can plan for the next tier, the next phase, as to which place we're going into. So absolutely, you should be getting that information. And I would say go to your local authority education, director of education or deputy director, whichever you have with education as their portfolio, and public health in your area, and ask that question. Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. And just on the data, I'm pretty sure that I think we've got quite a bit of information now collectively from colleagues across the country as to who is getting data and who's not, and there are massive discrepancies across the country. So perhaps if we can find a way to collate all that and share it, because we can use Coventry and other areas that are doing well with access to data, and people can bargain around that. I know in Lancashire it's still an issue. We managed a few weeks where they accidentally sent us all the bubble data, but they've realised they're doing that now and have pulled that. So, but we have used it and we continue to do so. So we'll try and pull that together and find a way to share that with everybody, because that'll be useful. In terms of CEV, that situation, well, the government situation, the new tiers is evolving, and well, we've just all found out today, and I think we're all being bombarded with messages. As far as I'm aware, our national union position is the same, and we will support individual schools up to and including industrial action if they want to organise around issues with colleagues not being given the opportunity to work from home. That situation still stands. It's absolutely ridiculous if we're expecting colleagues to put themselves at risk or be at risk in those environments. So it is back to that organising and collectivising idea, and going back to the broader question about what do we do around these new tiers. Well, it's those frustrating but necessary things we need to organise and collectivise. Where we've got reps, where we're active, then we're stronger. So very briefly, gosh, it feels like a long time ago now, but we organised some quite big events. It was when Liverpool was moved into tier 3. Gosh, it feels like a long time ago, but it wasn't really. Moved into tier 3, and we organised a big Zoom event there with Kevin and Steve Rotherham, one of the Metro mayors up there, and we did a similar event in Lancashire with Mary Bowstead and a local politician there with around 100 as well. So we use those as organising bases, and actually we recruited on the back of that. There's no easy solution to this. It's not, and it shouldn't be just about what we can send out nationally, although we've got tremendous resources. We need to be trying to organise as best we can locally. And I'm sure we're going to hear saying that it's not just relying on us sending stuff out. I'm sure we're going to see some new communications based on where we are now. But the reality is there was something like 900,000 pupils who couldn't attend school last week because transmission in secondary schools and primary schools is still going up, and that's the reality. So we've got to be vigilant and active. Sorry, Amanda, I've gone on a bit there.
That's all right, that's fine, thanks Ian. And I'll bring Andrew in just around the CEV question as well.
Yeah, just to add to what Ian was saying, really. I mean, the position has been a very definite position since the start of term. The issue, I suppose, that we've had is that a lot of our colleagues are reporting from around the country that, firstly, employers have not been receptive to the idea of staff working at home, and secondly, it's quite often been addressed as an issue of casework, and not always successfully as an issue of casework. So what we'll be seeking to do is two things, really. Just go further than simply setting out what our position is, but provide members and reps with, amongst other things, some model letters that can be sent to the employer, including where members may want to exercise the decision to refuse to attend the workplace but be available to work at home. And then I'm sure colleagues are familiar with the issue of Section 44 and Section 100 protection, which is a right not to suffer a detriment if you take a decision to remove yourself from a situation of serious and imminent danger. So we want to make sure that colleagues who want to do that are confident and have got material that explains to them and their employer what is happening and what should not happen as a consequence. We're also, as Ian said, very keen to make sure that people take it seriously as a collective issue. An injury to one is an injury to all, etc. It's not an issue of casework where clinically extremely vulnerable people are expected to put their lives at risk. It's an exemplification of an attitude that could cause problems for everybody if it manifests in other ways within the workplace.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks very much. And just one more comment on the supervision question. The union don't officially do that, and there's been long conversations around us not being the employers, etc. However, I think it's worth having conversations within your branches and districts as to, we all need buddy officers as well, where we might have to download and offload concerns or questions or ask for information, or just say, actually, that was a really tough case to deal with, I just need someone to listen to me. So I think that that's been really difficult, because we would normally have done that. I don't know about you, but we have kind of events where we might have a speaker or a campaign, and then it'll be a social event afterwards, and we've not been able to do that while we've been on Zoom. So I guess it's finding ways to communicate and work with your branch and district so that you do not feel alone in this time, and that you can offload, because the worst thing would be is for you to then become unwell or unable to cope, and then we would lose you, not only as a health and safety rep, but as a member and as someone who's doing such a great job. So absolutely should be taking the time to check with your branches and districts, and just drop in as a well-being way. I've got 3 more questions, and then I've got another 3 if we've got time. So Kay has asked, when will the recordings be available? And then Mary has asked, size of bubbles question. We have a whole 6th form college that is 1 bubble. The college leaders say that is in line with DFE. Is that correct? So that's a bubble question. And one that I know I've been asked a number of times. I am pregnant. I am not personally pregnant. I am pregnant, but I have been unable to negotiate working from home during the 3rd trimester. Help. So those 3 points. Who wants to start on those? Shall I come back to you, Sarah, again?
Yeah, on the question of recordings, as soon as possible. We're hoping to get a whole library of the recordings onto the website. I think our comms team are waiting till the whole we finished the whole month of webinars, and but we'll let you know as soon as they're up. On the bubbles question, I mean, that is absolutely taking the mickey big time. I mean, even the DFE guidance is loose, but it's not quite that loose. I mean, the guidance for FE talks about year group bubbles, which, as we know, are too big anyway, but that's only if a class size bubble isn't possible. I'm looking at the general guidance for schools. It talks about minimizing contacts and mixing, the overriding principle being reducing the number of contacts between students. And it does say, and I quote, we strongly recommend that as a minimum, you plan to keep your year groups or cohorts of students separate from each other during the day. So, saying that that a whole 6th form college is 1 bubble is just asking for trouble, and the end result will be that the virus is going to spread more easily, and it's going to cause more disruption, well, presumably they're not going to send the whole bubble home, but that it's going to lead to more disruption than if they tried to keep them more separate. And on the
Third
pregnant third trimester, yeah. Well, I think Andrew's made clear that we're going to be issuing some new guidance in relation to well, both CEV workers and also pregnant workers in the third trimester. So advising how to go about ensuring that that guidance is enforced. But I mean, just generally for pregnant women in the third trimester, so there needs to be a risk assessment. So the law requires employers to consider the risks to employees who are pregnant and to suspend them on full pay if it's impossible to avoid the risks to their health and safety. And pregnant women are still included in the government's list of those who are clinically vulnerable. If Patrick could, he might have already done it, but Patrick, if you haven't, could you post the vulnerable workers guidance in the chat? Because that includes a link to guidance from the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, which notes, it used to say that that people in this category should be working from home, but it does now say that while they might not be more likely to become infected by COVID-19, those that do contract any respiratory illnesses in the final trimester of pregnancy can become seriously unwell, and then the risks are increased due to other factors, you know, which might be related to age or race or obesity, for example. So all that needs to be taken into account in a risk assessment, and then it's up to the employer to demonstrate that it's a safe working environment. So that's why we're arguing that, and the resources that Andrew's just referred to will help press that argument.
Brilliant, thank you. Any of our other panelists want to comment on that? Jane?
Well, just if I may, just to come in and back up everything that Sarah, and to put it into practice, and to make sure that you have meetings with the, you know, if there is resistance, it's important that we challenge it seriously. And as Andrew said, to try and collectivize it, but sometimes that is hard because the member doesn't always want that. So, but you have to challenge it. And one of the pieces of advice that we've given is to actually get a letter from your, you know, from somebody in the health service that's supporting you, from your midwife, to back that up, because that can sometimes help. And on the size of bubbles, well, you know, schools have been very, where they have had big bubbles, then they've come a bit unstuck, haven't they? Because we've seen a number of schools where they've chosen to have big bubbles, where they've had to close for like a fire break. So I think that one of the bits of work that we did early on with the risk assessments when they came through was to try and intervene there and get smaller bubbles. But, you know, we have schools that think they know better, and it comes back to haunt them. So, but it's about not just the size of the bubbles, but how the school operates, how they move about as well, because I think that's the other side of it, is we've seen schools where they haven't taken enough care in young people moving around the school, where they've, you know, you can see it in the data where there's that sort of cross contamination, and it causes problems.
Thanks, Jane. So thanks very much for those answers. So I've got 3 more, and they're very, very similar actually in kind of the angst and the worry that people are having. I'm a district secretary. Members in my area are concerned that heads are not contacting the DFE helpline, then following a positive case, coming up with the responses themselves. What can be done in that scenario? The second one is staff and pupils at my school have been forced to delete the NHS app. Is that right? So like I'm saying, it's very similar, like not following what's the law, basically. And the third one, my school isn't following and is also not updating its own risk assessments. What can I do? Thank you.
Yeah, if I can pick up the one about the NHS app, and perhaps Colin can pick up some of the others then. I mean, we've been very clear about the fact that we don't think that this is appropriate, and the guidance is not ideal from the DfE. It's not as clear as it should be, and we've repeatedly said to the DfE that the way in which it's phrased references to the app and the consequences of alerts from the app has not been helpful. Now, clearly, the principles behind the app are not going to work if people are made to switch it off. It is possible to visualize situations in schools and other places where people are in close proximity, where a false contact can be registered because somebody is on the other side of a plate glass window from someone who later is tested positive. They clearly won't have contracted the virus even through close proximity because there will have been a plate glass window between them. But that is not very often the case in schools, that people are working in such a way as to generate those kind of false positives. So we're not in favour of the disconnection of the app on a blanket basis. We think that there may be situations that can be discussed with staff, but a policy of just switching it off is wholly inappropriate because it defeats the system. That also applies to a policy of saying, well, we've got too many staff now who've been contacted by the app, so we'll have to ignore those alerts as well. There's a reference in the guidance that suggests that schools may need to take other approaches if there are a large number of staff being contacted and told to self-isolate. The other approaches that I think the DfE has got in mind are things like getting in supply staff, not telling people to come to work when they've been told to self-isolate. And most of this, of course, is common sense, but some people do manage to lose their common sense in the face of a crisis, unfortunately.
Thank you very much. Any of the other panelists want to come in on those three? Ian?
Yeah, okay, will do. And just to go back a step, I can see from one of the IT team has posted some of the Health and Safety Month recordings are already on the website in the library, so that's great, and should be able to find it when you go on the website. The issue around underreporting or the PHE involvement and advice. We're certainly hearing about this in our area. Not all heads are reporting about cases. It's not being followed through in the way that's been expected. And the other aspect as well is where there are cases, there is some confusion, and we're not seeing consistency because the advice that's been given out by the Public Health England's advice line or reporting line is either being taken absolutely as read and therefore is in conflict with what the school might have in their own risk assessment, or is not being followed at all. So we're not seeing consistency, but what it comes back to is the school's risk assessment. So it's remembering that that's dynamic, and that should be something that's revisited whenever there's a change, and that change would include changes in infectivity levels and case rates in those areas. For example, again in my area, in one part of Preston, we've got one of the wards which is experiencing case rates of around 950 per 100,000, which is huge, and we're trying to organise around that with schools in those areas that are trying to carry on and undertake learning walks and lesson observations. So I'm digressing into other areas here, but the risk assessment is the absolute base, and that's what we should always try to come back to, and remember that it's dynamic. I know it's extra work, but it does make a difference.
But it also, like Ian says, it should be absolutely reviewed on government guidance changes. The government guidance has changed since those risk assessments were first done. There's been changes in the environment, more infections, less infections, depending on the rate and where you are in the country and where your school is. So absolutely, it needs to be reviewed. Sarah, did you want to come in any further? And then Jane, I'll come to you for a final comment. And Monica, if you wish to say anything.
Yeah.
Sarah.
Well, Ian said most of what I was going to say, so thank you, Ian. And just to add on the one about the heads not contacting the helpline, I think, you know, as Ian said, there are concerns about the consistency of the DfE advice and the quality of it, but it's better to seek it. And then, as Ian says, if you think it's duff advice or unsafe, then you refer back to the risk assessment, and that takes precedence over what the what the advice you might have got from the DFE helpline. I think as a head, you'd be putting yourself in a bit of a difficult situation if you don't seek advice and then things go pear-shaped.
Thanks, Sarah. Jane?
Yeah, I think others have answered all those questions, but there was a question earlier on about keeping schools safe and how do we do that? And I think, I mean, a lot of the problems that we get are directly related to DFE guidance and the government's position. But I think, you know, if it wasn't for the work of health and safety reps and people challenging in schools, then we would be in a far worse situation. And I think the other point really is that the National Education Union, the advice and guidance has stood head over heels above any other union, I think, in terms of the work that we've done. And so I think we just have to keep recruiting those health and safety reps, challenging where we can, and using the app and using section 44 as well if things, and reporting to the HSE where there are real issues as well. You know, let's dob them in if they're, you know, making those schools are making those decisions. So thank you.
Thanks very much. And Monica, just before I close, because we are 1 minute over, but if there's anything you wanted to add in regards to the training.
Yeah, I mean, just to say that the importance of having a health and safety rep in every school and college is, you know, it's just paramount at the moment. And, you know, I've heard if people are concerned about being a health and safety rep or worried about it, you absolutely don't need to be an expert. And I just wanted to remind everyone about the thinking of becoming a health and safety rep webinar that was on the first day of Health and Safety Month, and it has been recorded. So check in with that, because what that webinar has got is new health and safety reps who've stepped up in the current situation, talking about their own experience, talking about why they became a health and safety rep, what it's like, talking about the challenges, and talking about the difference that they've made. So do check that webinar out and perhaps use it as a sort of recruitment tool back in your branches and districts.
Thanks very much. And I want to say thank you to everybody. It's almost impossible to sum up the topics, the areas that we have covered during this month. But you've heard we produce 3 bulletins a week. We've heard that there's been a 5,000 sign up to the app. We've also heard that there's been changes today with regards to the tiers in the government. And I think as a branch and district secretary, you just need to say to people, hold on, we have produced that information before. We just need a few days to take that in and see what we are going to produce as a union. But please trust us. We have been doing that. And, you know, just to collate and collect that information. I think that you should be extremely proud to be in this union. It was mentioned that we are one of the only ones with a dedicated health and safety department, but we also have to be proud of the fact that you as lay members take on so much responsibility and work together. We've heard about training in December and January, and I cannot underestimate the challenge and the stressful times that you are facing as members and as health and safety reps and as school reps. But actually the successes are happening up and down the country, and we need to share those. This month has allowed us time to update our information and our advice. And anyone who's ever heard me say anything before, the trade union is a family you should choose to join, and you are in a cracking family here, and you are playing your part. So thank you very much for your time, not only this evening, but also your time in carrying out the roles on behalf of the union and your members. Thank you.